My name's John Quigley. I'm the Assistant Dean for Advancement for the College of Arts and Sciences, and I want to welcome you to our Arts and Sciences Alumni Academy presentation for today, featuring Dr. Tanisha Jackson. At this time, I want to ask you to make sure that your microphone is muted and to keep yourself muted during Dr. Jackson's presentation. This is going to ensure that everyone will be able to hear our presentation. We'll be recording this webinar, and we plan to make it available via the college's YouTube platform for later if you wanted to go back and check something out or recommend it to someone to watch later. Before we begin the presentation, I also want to ask you to hold your questions for Dr. Jackson until the end of the presentation. We'll have plenty of time at the end for discussion and for Q&A and so forth. So I think we're ready to begin. Right now I'm going to introduce Karin Roulant. Professor Roulant is the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, and I wanted to turn it over to her now. Go ahead, Karin.
As John indicated, I'm the Dean of the College, and it's a real pleasure having you all with us today. Today, we are finishing our third week of classes, and I'm really delighted to see the campus being bustling with activity with our students back and classes in session. So part of what makes our campus and Arts and Sciences really special are the variety of cultural organizations here and the scholarship which is taking place. In a moment, you will be hearing from Dr. Tanisha Jackson. She's the executive director of the Community Folk Arts Center, which is dedicated to art from the African diaspora. Tanisha is also a professor of practice in our Department of African American Studies. She joined us in 2019 and has brought a lot of energy and vision with her, studying social justice initiatives that build community and address inequities. Prior to joining us in Arts and Sciences, Tanisha served as the Assistant Director of the Frank W. Hale Jr. Black Cultural Center at The Ohio State University. Concurrently, she also served as an adjunct assistant professor of Africana Studies at the University of Cincinnati, specializing in e-learning strategies, and a visiting assistant professor of Africana Studies at the University of Toledo. It was at Ohio State that Dr. Jackson earned multiple degrees, including a PhD in art education and an MA in African American and African Studies. She also earned an MBA from the University of Toledo. As a professor here at Syracuse University, Dr. Jackson teaches classes in African diaspora art, including art of the Black world and contemporary Black film. Her research focuses on the representation of Black women's wellness in contemporary art and popular culture, in multimedia and community spaces. I won't give too much away about this topic, but I think you will find Dr. Jackson's presentation timely, insightful, and engaging. These are the kinds of contemporary questions that faculty like Dr. Jackson tackle here at Arts and Sciences every day. So without further ado, let me please welcome today's Alumni Academy presenter, Tanisha Jackson. Tanisha?
Thank you, Karin. Thank you for that warm welcome. Thank you, everyone who's in attendance today. It's a pleasure to be before you and to share my research that I'm doing both in practice as well as in scholarship and writing. And so, and what I mean by that is that the work that I write is definitely connected to the work that is taking place at the Community Folk Arts Center. The two are inextricably intertwined. And so I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully you'll be able to see what I can see here. And let's see, show how the two connect. Okay, so I want to open up with a poem, and also explain that the image before you is called Acceptance, and it is a photograph from artist SHANEQUA Gay, who is based in Atlanta. So I'll begin. I have a need for Black women to recognize themselves as holy, empowered, capable of love and vengeance, chaos and peace, silenced but loud, able to chant a shift in the atmosphere, witchy to some, godly to others, new beings as unto themselves. That poem is part of the work that SHANEQUA does. She's a multi-mediated artist, and that involves performing arts. And so I collected this work, this particular poem and images, both from the artist directly, but also from her social media, where I've been really compiling images and building relationships with contemporary Black women artists for the purposes of really trying to understand how Black women are addressing our own wellness and health through visual art. So, you know, it is a timely topic because of what's going on in our society. There's so much angst, and when we think about, you know, Black Lives Matter protests, police brutality, and there is no movement, particularly within the United States, in which the arts was not a part of, in which the arts, visual arts in particular, has not documented. So in the long trajectory of visual arts, and particularly Black art within the United States, the art that is typically created reflects what's socially and sociopolitically taking place within the nation. And this is a really great example because it's the most recent cover of Vanity Fair, and it's a painting created by Amy Sherald. And this is their, I believe, their September 2020 cover. So for those of you who may be familiar with Amy Sherald, she's the painter who is known for painting the portrait of First Lady Michelle Obama a few years back that currently hangs in the National Portrait Gallery. And she's known for painting portraits of Black people in gray hue and really capturing the life, right, the lived experiences of particularly African Americans within the United States. And so in an effort to really recognize what's going on nationally and to honor the memory of Breonna Taylor, a young lady who was killed while sleeping in her bed in Louisville, Kentucky, during a no-knock warrant, right? She was shot by police. Her and her boyfriend were there, and she lost her life. Her name has, because of that incident and many others like it, has been circulating in the within the national conversation of police brutality. Okay, and so this is just one of many examples that I'm going to explore today in which Black contemporary women artists are using their art as a platform to talk about what they experience personally, as well as collectively within their respective communities. So, before I move on, I think I do want to establish specifically what my work focuses on in terms of the theoretical framework and some of the models that I'm using. So I actually will stay here, but bear with me while I just read a portion of my thoughts. So the art of Black women's wellness examines the significant role of how Black women artists facilitate wellness for themselves and others, by analyzing how the visual narratives in their artwork, along with personal narratives and art-making practices, influence and reflect elements of wellness for themselves and the Black community at large. This research sets out to bridge the seemingly disparate fields of Black women's mental health and visual art to think critically about how contemporary Black women artists have been making art as a socio-political strategy to save themselves and others in their respective communities. Furthermore, it explores how Black women artists strategically organize and mobilize to collectives or in collectives and Black art spaces that I have coined as Black art ecosystems. So this is a term that I'm going to revisit in my talk today, but essentially I've come to identify spaces that help to, for Black women artists to come together as Black arts ecosystems. Okay, so these spaces as well as these collectives support the overall sustainability of their work, and all of which connects back to the wellness of individuals who are involved in art making as well as the community. So, and before we can really understand, and let me see if I can click out of here, you know, how the artwork is connected to wellness, we need to have an understanding about the state of Black women's health and wellness, particularly within a US context. So national centers and organizations like the National Wellness Institute define wellness as an active process through which people become aware of and make choices toward a more successful existence. This is important for Black women whose overall state of health faces critical disparities at a national level. Yet this definition of wellness suggests that Black women, through self-determination and strategic actions, can empower themselves to acquire a state of wellness. So how African American women artists understand and facilitate their wellness is indicative in, you know, how we organize, how we come together, how we create cultural practices. And I can't emphasize enough that it's a significant political act that questions structural and institutional race and gender inequity that has a direct impact on their overall health disparity. So the assumption that Black women share a common identity has long been the basis for mental health practitioners who seek to provide services through a Black feminist framework. And that's vastly different from the healthcare practices or mental health care practices, I should say, within mainstream organizations or healthcare facilities. Specifically, these mental health care providers provide mental health services that speak to Black women's experiences that are distinctly different from other groups based on race and gender. And so my research analyzes the representation of Black women's wellness and Black women's artwork and their actual process for making their art. So it's not enough to just look at the art and say, oh, this is a positive image. This is we like the visual aesthetics of that. But the actual process of how these Black women are making art is deeply rooted and connected to the end result of what we see as, viewers of the art. Okay. So my work explores the impact that Black women artists have on facilitating wellness in their respective communities by addressing, specifically in their art, socioeconomic and political interests and demands through collective work. And by creating a space that supports Black women artists in their communities. I'm drawing specifically on archival information, oral history, because I have spent a lot of time with these women interviewing them, along with visual analysis of their artwork. And my overall research project illustrates how Black women artists construct a practical model for achieving wellness and draw upon reestablish the significant roles that Black women artists and art in general have in Black communities in ways that prioritize their interests. That is particularly important because to this day, there is inequity when it comes to art and in the art world, the art sector. There's a hierarchy of what's considered to be high art, who has access to spaces in terms of exhibitions. Is one of the reasons why the Community Folk Arts Center is critical and so important in spaces and within the nation, and I would say the world, because it gives space for artists who are seldom seen, marginalized, and centers them. And this is essentially what I am trying to achieve by even highlighting these women artists today. So let's talk about health and wellness before I really transition with the understanding that the primary determinants of a person's quality of health are based on their social, economic, and physical environment, as well as a person's characteristics and behavior. And that's according to the World Health Organization. As it relates to Black women in the United States, advocates and health practitioners investigate Black women's health through an array of categories, such as access to affordable health care, disease prevention, mental health care, equitable responses to public health emergencies, sufficient diversity in clinical research, and legislative agenda that stymie the progression of Black women's health. National organizations like the Black Women's Health Imperative, whose logo you see in front of you, report that the federal government has decreased investments in the care of women of color in general and for Black women specifically. And that report was released in 2019. This organization, along with others focused on Black women's health, are committed to building institutional strategies and national health policies, policy agendas that advocate for Black women's health. Despite these organizations' effort, there has been little conclusive progress in improving the overall health of Black women in the United States since the 1985 Heckler Report on Black and minority health, whose findings on health disparities are really alarming. Notwithstanding the slow progress of Black women's health, 9.5 million Black women are reported to be in good health. And that's important because when the system fails, right, a community, particularly marginalized communities, that's when we see the collective effort and the self-determination to address these disparities in ways that are necessary for the survival of people of these communities. So the 9.5 million Black women who are reported to be in good health is something that Black feminist scholars and various forms of wellness workers ascribe to culturally appropriate models of mental health practices. That is, that they are engaging in culturally appropriate models of mental health practices that positively impact Black women's mental health and wellness. And both the focus on institutional strategies and culturally appropriate work of wellness workers seek the value of centering a discussion on Black women's wellness, but often this approach to Black women's wellness is facilitated by clinical and structural healthcare. Now, I want to be clear, I'm not speaking against, right, clinical or professional healthcare, but I am advocating that clinical and professional healthcare be culturally conducive to the people that they serve. And also that we take into consideration the wellness workers within the communities like the Black community and see the value in some of these cultural practices being implemented in these institutional spaces. So, typically, traditional medicine, traditional healthcare fails to consider a population of wellness workers who are informally cultivating wellness for themselves and others outside of structured healthcare and communities. But we're going to see what happens when they do. And so I want to, before I really get into the nuts and bolts of the art, offer you one more piece, critical piece of my research, which is a Black feminist framework and the BREATHE model, which is connected to, a Black woman's mental health approach. So you see in front of you an acronym called BREATHE. And I think the concept of breath, right, of breathing in and of itself, when we think about that, that's wellness. To breathe means that you're living, to have the capacity to deep breathe oftentimes centers people. For those of you who engage in yoga, meditation, that's oftentimes part of it. And so I want to connect this model to the artwork that we're going to look at, because my argument is that in all of the work that I am analyzing, that I am, deconstructing, and in my conversations with these artists, that their work models, if not some of the acronyms of BREATHE, all of the acronyms of BREATHE. And that's how that's part of the metrics that I'm using to identify that the work that they are creating is connected to Black women's health and wellness. So my work offers a new approach to exploring Black women's wellness by examining how Black women's wellness is defined in contemporary Black women's art and local Black art ecosystems. And the BREATHE model extends, the discourse of this and offers an alternative framework from understanding its relevance to and impact on Black communities overall. It's important that I approach my work through a Black feminist framework and use it to analyze the artwork in my project because this framework, what it does is it centers, right, Black women. Black women are the vehicle, and how can I say this? Using art as the vehicle to center themselves is what these artists are doing, and their experiences and what is going on in their communities as a critical study. And the practice of Black women centering themselves is connected to standpoint theory, which is a theory that is heavily used in Black feminist theory, where theorists emphasize the utility of an everyday experiential concept of knowing. So then, standpoint theory supports the strong objectivity, or the notion that the perspectives of marginalized and or oppressed individuals can help to create a more objective account of their world. As it relates to Black women's standpoint, they are in a unique position to examine and critique their collective experience. And really, I want to put myself in this. We are in a unique position, right, to examine and critique our collective experiences in ways that members in other cultures, and particularly the dominant group culture, cannot. Black women can and often do serve as agents of knowledge in regard to their experiences, and can effectively challenge the status quo as the outsider within. And that's a quote really taken from Patricia Hills Collins, who is, whose work on Black feminist theory is very well known. So Hill Collins argues that individual African-American women show varying types of consciousness regarding Black women's shared angle of vision. So we're not monolithic, we're not all the same, but it's our shared experience that helps, right, to create this unique common angle where we can speak as a collective. By aggregating and articulating individual Black women's expressions and consciousness, a collective focus group consciousness becomes possible. An example of the work that I'm doing is when I look at individual Black women artists who are articulating their experiences as Black women in the United States through art. Their Black woman standpoint is displayed in the context of images, right, and expressions. And I find the collective group consciousness that Hill Collins describes when she talks about, standpoint theory. And so just wanting to emphasize that, you know, that there are some common experiences, cultural experiences, and then, that are important, and it's the reason why we're able to look at individual artists and apply their work to the overall collective. So let's talk about the BREATHE model. The BREATHE model is taken, and I came across this work in Black Women's Mental Health, written by Dr. Stephanie Evans, Dr. Kanika Bell, and Dr. Nsenga Burton. And this really connected to me because I felt like it provided the language, again, for me to be able to measure and the artwork that I'm looking at as tools of wellness or as evidence of wellness. So BREATHE is balance, reflection, energy, association, transparency, healing, and empowerment. And, you know, those are just very blanket terms, but let's dig deeper. Balance, when we talk about balance, that means to engage in the purposeful repositioning of one's commitment such that all priorities are addressed. And this is something that everyone should be seeking, I would think, really seeking balance, right? And it's the repositioning, right? That intentionality to really claim the balance or have balance in your life that becomes activated at a very conscious level, or once you're made to be conscious of it. Reflection. Reflection means set aside time for contemplation and performing emotional and cognitive audits. Okay. Energy. Reinvigorate goals and set up a path toward achieving them. Association. Create and maintain social networks that promote, affirm, and encourage wellness. So when Black women come together as groups, whether it is informal or formal, these associations help to facilitate wellness. And then healing. Look for ways to nurture wellness in self and others. Last, empowerment. Enlist one's agency by accessing internal power sources and taking ownership of one's own wellness. So let me move on. Before I can talk about contemporary Black women artists, I must talk about the foundation, at least when we think about collectives and Black women coming together. And really my work begins in the artwork that I focus on when I talk about contemporary art. I'm really beginning in the late 60s, early 70s, when looking at the historiography of contemporary Black women artists. And that is an important time period. One, because it's during this time that the Black arts movement and the white feminist movement are taking place, okay? And these two particular movements are really interesting because they set the need, right? They are the reason why there was a need for Black women artists to organize collectively. So during the Black arts movement, there were many different organizations like Spiral, OBAC, AfriCobra, Beck, the Woosie Art Collective, the Black Aesthetic, Themes and Missions and Vision that were all connected to providing art that had a specific Black aesthetic that spoke to Black politics. And so in a very structured way, the Black arts movement, you know, had themes and missions and visions that within their art that was identifiable. It doesn't mean that all the Black artists agreed. Sometimes they did not. But one thing for sure, for certain, is that there was not a space for Black women because of patriarchy. There are a few Black women that have been documented. For those of you who are art historians. We can look at very few Black women who are allowed into art spaces or Black collectives because of patriarchy. At the same time, there wasn't a space for Black women in general and Black women artists in feminist spaces because of racism. So you have white art feminist groups like the Whitney Fiasco. You have, the springing up of publications that are addressing gender inequity and issues, but that fail to recognize the unique experiences of Black women who are subjugated because of not just gender, but also race. But in 1971, yes, we come across a article and I have it here in front of you, and I love to dig in the crates, so I was excited to come across this work. But specifically, the first organized the first Black women's art collective is formed in 1971, and their name is Where We At. And it's in response to needing a space that address race and gender issues. And what I find very powerful in this article written by Kay Brown, one of the founders of Where We At, is that not only does it explain why this collective exists, but it really shows the organization, right? How they really provided a platform and their demands, which really gives detail to what Black women artists were experiencing. So we have 6 of them, and if you think about the Black Panther Party that had a 10-point plan, this very platform, this very much mirrors that type of thinking and organizing, so that the Where We At Black Women Artists Collective has 6 demands. The first is that Black women's exhibition, because there never was one, so that women should be recognized not only as Black artists, but also as women, because most Black women artists live in Brooklyn. They're New York based. 2, the museums should provide daycare centers for children's workshops so that mothers can attend classes. 3, the museums should underwrite projects and workshops relevant to the community. 4, the museums should provide part-time scholarships as well as full-time to women having work during the day. 5, any scholarship program should be publicized so that artists could know about the program, so having access to information and knowledge. And 6, the museum should take an active part in helping the women artists obtain living and working spaces. So from this platform, we understand that a lot of the lack of access has to do, with childcare, with access to, with the economic situations in terms of them having access to classes or not having access because of the type of work that they're doing, being shut out of museum spaces, so on and so forth. One last collective I want to recognize and honor is the Women of Vision, who is presently still in existence, and they are in Pittsburgh. It is the longest serving Black women's art collective in the US. And to this day, they not only provide opportunities for Black women artists to showcase their work at a national and international level, but they also have programs that are geared towards social issues in the community, creating opportunities for people who are in the carceral system, for young people who are perhaps, needing an outlet. And so I recognize them because they still exist and are doing very important work in the Pittsburgh area, particularly in, in spaces where there are a lot of challenges, and that's connected to another artist, but I'm not going to talk about her today. I'm not going to have time, so we're just going to move forward. Okay, so I want to begin, or also, let me rephrase that. I want to talk specifically about SHANEQUA Gay. SHANEQUA Gay is the artist whose work I opened up with. And SHANEQUA Gay is someone whose work really exemplifies artists who are coming, who are based in the South. She's heavily influenced by, the Bible Belt, as she calls it, and then also having strong familial ties. When SHANEQUA began creating work, it was often work that highlighted the people, the members in her family, as well as she started off painting women in church hats. But in 2008, SHANEQUA recalls having dreams about men running and shape-shifting into deer. And that kicked off what's called the Fair Game Project. And I don't have the image in front of you, but initially it was figures of Black men running with these deer masks on their face, kind of like the central blue mask in front of you here. And they were jumping over barbed wire fences. Now, when we think about fair game, we understand that to be kind of like connected to hunting. And so in the background of the paintings that she created were people who were silhouettes of people with shotguns who were shooting at these men jumping over fences. So she created the Fair Game Project in response to not only this dream, but her fear of being the mother of a young Black man, young Black boy at the time, and what was going on in the news concerning, we can think about many examples, and now it's even heightened today with people, Black men in particular, being shot. However, her work transitioned to what's called the devout. And we are looking at two images that are connected to her series, The Devout. So, stepping away from Black men being shot, SHANEQUA wanted to address the experiences of Black women, and particularly Black women in her everyday life who exhibits forms of wellness and healing, but then also honor those who come across, the same type of police brutality. Arguably, when it comes to Black women who are impacted by violence, gun violence in particular, it doesn't necessarily get the same coverage and notoriety in the news. And so understanding that, SHANEQUA created the piece in 2018, I Come As Us. Now, to see this installation in person, you have to understand, the scale of this installation. If you look at these 4 images, they are in mask, and these are archetypes. There's a bull, there's a raven, there's a deer, and there is another one, I'm blanking on it, but it'll come to me. But these masks are consistent throughout her work. And the scale of the images speaks to wanting to command, the attention of the people visiting the actual exhibition. However, if you look closely at the gold and Black background, once you get past the scale of the sculptures, you may see that those are figures, those are heads that are on stems. And if you look even closer, or if you recognize the images even closer, you'll see that these sculptures are works that specifically depict the victims of violence that have been in the national news. So Black women like Renisha McBride, Sandra Bland, Corin Gaines, and Erica Garner. And so this is an installation that really is about a group of aggrandized beings that are mourning and praying for these victims. The devout are a group of mythical figures. And so SHANEQUA deals with mythology, and there's a whole conversation of, how Black women are able to command both the temporal space, the physical world, but also the spiritual world. And these figures are the guards right between those worlds. And if you can see, if you really look, they are also not only mourning or paying homage to the victims, but then also empowering and celebrating Black womanhood while addressing the overall traumas that Black women experience collectively. And this is just one of many examples in which Black women are using their art to speak to the collective experiences of the community, particularly trauma. And so in many ways, in creating the artwork, it becomes a form of wellness for SHANEQUA, but also it facilitates a discussion that centers Black women and facilitates wellness. The image on the right, The Summoning, is a painting that was in a recent exhibition. Let me go back, getting a little too happy with the clicker, that was part of an exhibition at Gallery Mertis, and it got shortened because of COVID-19, but there's a beautiful online catalog of the work and videos to facilitate the artist talks that wasn't heard in person. But these are Black women who are wearing the archetype mask, the bull representing strength, the raven and the deer representing youth, the raven representing, really going after, resources and scraps and so on and so forth. But these women are praying. And within the devout, where she has several paintings and several photographs, we see these women in different spaces, right? And as a collective performing rituals that are strongly connected to health and wellness. And a lot of SHANEQUA's work is deeply rooted in her understanding of, and research in her understanding of African iconography, as well as healing practices. And she also borrows from other cultures as well. For the sake of time, I'm going to show you this because it's important. It's the last thing I want to say about SHANEQUA Gay before moving forward. And then I'll skip to the next artist. But I want to show you a film called The Crooked Room. The Crooked Room is a performing art video of models wearing the devout mask, and just listen to the audio backdrop. This is a voiceover, if you will, coming from Melissa Harris Perry, Dr. Melissa Harris Perry, and just listen, then I'll connect it back to today's topic.
For the book, there's one other framework that I want to offer. And this is my training as a political psychologist. So this is research on cognitive psychology. It's not research on race or gender or class or even on politics. It's research on how our brains work. And the first time I encountered this research, I found it fascinating. It's what we call field dependency studies. And dependency here is not political dependency or economic dependency, and field is not the political field, right? It's literally our visual perceptual field, what we see and how what we see impacts how we figure out where we are in space. So these are some of the coolest, if you know this cognitive psychology research, are some of the coolest studies you can imagine. They would take a subject into a room, and it was dark, and they flipped the light on. When the light was flipped on in the room, all of the angles of the room were crooked. So the walls, instead of meeting at 90 degrees, would meet off kilter, and the door jamb would be off kilter, and all of the pictures on the wall would be hung at an angle. Everything around you would be off kilter to a particular angle. And you as a subject would be sitting in a chair, like if you've ever been to Universal Studios, those chairs that move, right? your responsibility as a subject was to find the straight up and down. So everything around you, everything in your perceptual field is off kilter. Your responsibility is to see if you can figure out what is straight up and down. Now, some people are field independent, and despite all these crooked images around them, they're able to find the straight up and down. But most people, the vast majority of us, are field dependent. And when all the stimuli around us tell us that the world is tilted like this, we can tilt ourselves as much as 45 degrees, but experience ourselves perceptually as straight up and down because we're in line with the crooked images. Again, this is not research on race. It's not research on gender. It's not research on politics. For the first time I encountered this, I said, oh, that is just like being a Black woman in America, right? This consistent experience of walking around in a room where everything is off kilter, where everything that you expect to meet at 90 degrees is actually meeting at about 62, where that picture looks about right, but you kind of have to do like this to be able to see yourself in it. That the field, the perceptual field for African American women is literally off kilter. And so the claim I make in Sister Citizen is that resource disparity work is real political work. Running for office is real political work. Being on the school board is real political work. But it's also real political work to just try to find one's authentic sense of self in a social, political, and historical environment that is going to keep giving you back negative images and crooked ones. And
okay, so one thing I want to say that it's intentional that that video looks distorted the way that it does, that it's grainy, that it's focusing in and out, because what SHANEQUA is doing is visually representing what Harris Perry is describing as a, the distorted perception, right? The field dependent, right, experience, and what it means, right? This experience of being, not having a seat at the table, being marginalized. And that's just one of many experiences. It's not the only experiences of Black women. But when we talk about resource disparity work, when we talk about addressing the inequities that are taking place, that we are living in and seeing in real time, right? These artists give voice to those experiences. And this is just one example, one of many examples. I keep saying that. I love video in particular, or the composition of this particular video, and the fact that it's multi-mediated, because to give voice to images, to have them moving, really brings together what we embrace. And I know I'm generalizing, but in a world where we are constantly on social media and watching TV and video, it really resonates, I think, with a lot of viewers. LAVETT Ballard is the next artist in Philadelphia. And I'm excited about LAVETT Ballard because she will be exhibiting at the Community Folk Arts Center this spring. LAVETT Ballard is a mixed media installation artist who compiles photographic catalogs of female images that cover the African diaspora. So she will collect images that are, all over. She does a lot of research. And what she does is she creates these sculptures, these wood fence sculptures, as well as there's a few that are in the round and that are smaller. But she does this in order to really, sorry about that, talk about racial gender identity issues, and also the subject of self-identity for Black women. And so particularly, she states, I'm looking to embrace African-American self-identity in an effort to create positive visual lexicon of our history. And she uses reclaimed large wood as well as small age wood fences as a symbolic reference to how fences, right, keep people in and out, just as racial and gender identities can do the same socially. So I found out that to be interesting, and her use of fences reminded me of August Wilson's renowned play of Fences, in which, metaphorically, he uses the fence in that same way. You're looking at 3 images. The first 2 are part of the same exhibition that SHANEQUA Gay exhibited in, which is Women Heal Through Rite and Ritual. And Gallery Mertis is located in Baltimore, a really great friend and colleague. And the first image in the lineup of this purple image here is called She's Immortal. And it is an image that talks about Henrietta Lacks, a Black woman who's responsible for the helix, right? The helix cell that is used for polio to this day. So her cells were, that provides the vaccine for polio, she was never compensated. It's a very sad story. To this day, her family is fighting, over, certain scientific rights. But her story is a part of a trajectory of Black bodies being used in science, and sometimes in pseudoscience, in ways that are dehumanizing, and in ways that shows that they don't have rights, that we don't have rights to our bodies in the medical field, that we're underserved and then, can be used in this way. So she pays homage to Henrietta Lacks, who is the figure here. And there was a book that came out about her a few years back, and it's an example of how she uses the fences to show, to censure Henrietta Lacks, but also to convey beauty. This next image, and I'm looking for, where is that? Look for my notes. Is one focused on healing. And these particular figures are local figures that are, sorry about this, that are connected to the women, or church women in her community. So they could be identifiable figures, but then also women in her everyday community and her family. And this is connected to healing. And there's different iconography within the composition of this piece that suggests that there's healing taking place. The third image is an image that was on the cover of Time magazine in March, in honor of Women's History Month. And so Time magazine showcased many artists within its pages and on its cover in select geographical areas to highlight the contributions of women. We also understand that it's in 2020 that women's suffrage, right, is being recognized. But LAVETT Ballard was selected by Time magazine to create this piece, and it's an actual fence. They are triptych and diptych sculptures, and this one in particular is called The Bus Rider Demanding Dignity. We recognize Rosa Parks, right, as the central figure, but then also there are several other images that this artist is asking people to explore and to really come to know the unsung heroes, if you will. So she does this by having intertextuality, so images and text. This is some of the newspapers of that time that really covered the Montgomery bus boycott, the girls, that were killed, let's see, on a bus seat, and then there's a few other things. So there's a story behind that I'm exploring with her. Lava Thomas, and I'm almost done, is another artist who has a very interesting story. And we remember the tragic killing of church members in Charleston. And this piece, which was, it sits in a National Gallery, it's called the Requiem of Charleston. And they are tambourines with the names of the victims that were killed in the church in Charleston. So let's see here, Reverend Pinkney and then Susie Jackson are the two tambourines on the right that I've selected to highlight. And what this piece shows is is how the artist is using her artwork for national healing. The tambourine is symbolic of praise and worship in many cultures, and particularly in in churches, and particularly the Black church, and to have their names engraved on like this lambskin and then used as a sculpture is a way in which her work was used to help to honor the victims of the shooting. And for those of you who don't know the story, you know, a young white man came into the church, was part of the Bible study of this church in Charleston, and then ended up shooting and killing almost all of the people there. And so there's that. The last piece that I want to show coming from LAVETT Thomas is very much in part of a scandal. So that LAVETT Thomas was, she submitted a sculpture to honor Maya Angelou in Oakland. And she was, she won, right? And this sculpture is unlike other sculptures in that it's not the traditional figure that we come to really be used to when it comes to sculptures that honor or represent our heroes. And so although she won the votes for having her sculpture be the one selected for this public work that would be in front of a library, specifically, one of the, I'm sorry, I'm stumbling on this. Let me look at this. Her sculpture was scrapped by San Francisco supervisor Catherine Stephanie, who didn't think that for a significant figure that it was the appropriate representation. Now, this is interesting because Catherine is an elected official, and she is part of a community that's not LAVETT's community. It's an affluent white community. And although LAVETT, rightfully was voted and selected her work, that is, she inserted herself, Stephanie, and to say that this work is not appropriate to honor Maya Angelou. And so there was a lot of protests that took place and has taken place before LAVETT received a public apologies, and she withdrew her her submission because of that. But it's important because when we think about sculptures today, we have to understand that how we look at traditional sculptures is a very Eurocentric and patriarchal perspective in terms of what constitutes an appropriate sculpture for honoring heroes, right? So if we're looking at Confederate sculptures, or if we're looking at any sculptures, if it doesn't look like that, then it's not appropriate. And that led to a lot of protests and a Black women's collective called See Black Women. And so, but before I talk about that, I have to establish what a Black women's art ecosystem is. Okay, so Black women art ecosystem is a term that I've coined. And when you think about an ecosystem, ecosystems are defined areas in which a community lives, with interactions taking place among organisms between the community and its non-living physical environment. And this is just a visual example of an ecosystem in a very, scientific way. An ecosystem is formed by the interactions between all living and non-living things. Well, there are many, symbolically, we of course live in an ecosystem or are part of an ecosystem. But when we think about Black women art ecosystems, I'm talking about studios, galleries, boutique museums, digital spaces for Black women collectives. And I use Black women with the X because I'm also recognizing and identifying Black women who may not have been born you know, biologically, but as a female, but identify as a woman. So the See Black Women is one of many Black collectives taking place, and one that in Oakland, California, and one that supported LAVETT in the campaign to abolish white supremacy at in San Francisco. And so you can find them on Instagram to see their work, but they strive to provide support for Black women artists, as well as other women of color, but particularly they had a campaign called See Black Women Rising that addressed the issue of LAVETT, and it's an example of how these ecosystems really work to organize and strategize against structural racism and inequity in the arts. The Colored Girls Museum in Philadelphia is another example of Black women's art ecosystems. And my friend Vashti is someone who turned a 3-story house in Philadelphia into a memoir museum, which honors stories and experiences and the history of the ordinary colored girl. And she's using the word color, you know, specifically. But it is a space where she has on each floor different themes and different exhibits that talks about the health and wellness of Black women. And there's one space in particular called Urgent Care. Here are examples of the Colored Girls Museum so that you can see the installation of dolls, of paintings, you know, material culture. And these are items that have been donated by people in the community, as well as artists specifically that she's working with. The image on the far right that you see is an installation piece from LAVETT BALLARD. So just bringing in that connectivity of how Black women art ecosystems are connected to the individual artists that I explore in my work. Okay, and then I'm going to talk really briefly, and this is 2 more slides, about the Community Folk Arts Center. So as the executive director of the Community Folk Arts Center, I strive to, you know, to really model what I have shown other people to be doing. Although we don't exclusively show artwork stemming from Black women artists, and there are many shows under my tenure where they have been Black male artists or you know, Latinx artists, but it is part of what I'm working on to highlight Black women artists as a continuum, not only because it's my research, but also because it serves the purpose of really wanting to provide a Black women's art ecosystem, so developing collectives that are connected to the Syracuse community. And for those of you who don't know, the Community Folk Arts Center is a proud unit of the Department of African American Studies in the College of Arts and Sciences here at Syracuse University. We are in year 48, we're almost 50 years old, and it is the only African Diasporic Arts Center in the city of Syracuse. So the work is extremely important, and it started at a grassroots level and continues to bridge both the Syracuse community with the local and surrounding communities in order to foster conversations that are strongly you know, facilitated through arts or the arts. So it's not just the visual gallery, but we have a dance studio, a beautiful black box theater, and ceramics programming, and a wealth of other resources. We also do outreach in the community, and we're going to have an event this Saturday, which is a Black Lives Matter paint party that's not in the space, but will be in the community, where we'll be practicing social distancing, but also providing an outlet for people to create artwork that honors and recognizes the movement, the Black Lives Matter movement in Syracuse. One good example of a Black woman artist in Syracuse who is currently exhibiting on our new online gallery and you can see the URL there, cfacgallery.org, is Sherilyn Beckles. Sherilyn Beckles is a recent graduate in Newhouse, and she is a photographer. And during the Black Lives Matter Syracuse protest, she picked up her portable microphone and camera. She started off as a protester, but she picked up her portable microphone and camera and began interviewing protesters and collecting or taking these beautiful Black and white photos in order to capture images from the movement. So this is a very short clip. It's less than 30 seconds, but I just want you to hear the voices of people of the protest and look at two images from Sherilyn Beckles, who is a local example of Black women artists using their artwork to connect with social justice initiatives and inequities within their community.
I feel anger still because I'm not sure if our voices are truly heard.
We're not going to let, people get in the way of what we are trying to do.
It means safety for my kids. It means me being a Black man and having half Black children, they get treated equally.
I have Black sons, I have Black daughters, you know what I'm saying? And I don't want them to grow up with the same adversities that we had to grow up with, you understand? As a Black people, we're already growing up with strikes against us. We're already being racially profiled by the police, you know what I'm saying? By all law enforcement, actually, you know what I'm saying, including judges and lawyers and whoever else. So basically, we're born with strikes against us. So if I can get out here and I can make a difference in anybody, it doesn't have to be my child. It could be a white child, it could be a Black child, it could be any child's life. If I can make a difference, I'm happy to be here.
It's bigger than just police. Racist police, it's racist people too that we got to deal with. So this is bigger, and it's all that.
So those are voices from people within Syracuse, the local community. And two images I want to leave you with that you can explore more on the online exhibition and that stays in perpetuity, so it will never go away, is called A Peaceful Confrontation and Black Lives Matter March. I wanted to show you these two images specifically. One, because the one on the left, a peaceful protest, is of a young Black girl who was in a group, and they had just finished protesting, and she saw this police car, and unprompted, she positioned herself in front of this parked car and posed with her fist up to in protest and to show solidarity for the movement. It's one of my personal favorite pieces, and this piece is not only in the virtual gallery, but it hangs in our gallery, our physical gallery too. The other piece on the right, Black Lives Matter March, is one of many of Sherilyn Beckles' images that shows the diversity of protesters, that this is not just Black people protesting, that this is not just a Black issue, but that it impacts everyone within our communities at a local, national, and even international level. And so to show this diversity was, the diversity of the movement was important to Sherilyn Beckles. And we have a conversation, we continue the conversation on CFAC's new podcast, which you can also access on the new online gallery. So I want to encourage you to visit the online gallery, because there's going to be more work, right, that reflects themes that I've covered today, as well as some new artists to explore. And I'm going to end there and say thank you for your time.
You guys are doing great work, and it's important work, and you need resources to do it. The college gives you some money, but spread the word and let people know that if you're in a position to make a donation, CFAC has a donation button on their website, and people can help out that way too.
Yes, I definitely want to thank you for mentioning that. We definitely need the funding to continue the work that we're doing in digital spaces. And so what I endeavor to do is to provide content like, performances, virtual art classes And there's ways in which you can help us do that by donating. The donation button can be accessed on the virtual gallery as well as our main website, which is communityfolkartcenter.org or the cfacgallery.org. And so there's more to come with CFAC, or from CFAC through digital programming, and we look forward to opening when the world is in a safer and healthier state, because we miss the community tremendously. I just want to end with this, that who we are is deeply rooted and connected to the community that we serve. And so our connectivity is important, and we are striving to do so with this virtual gallery and as well as in many other innovative and creative ways. So, but thank you for hearing me, and thank you for your continued support. It's the reason why we are almost 50 years old. And I'm so deeply, although I'm new, right, to this legacy, I've only been here for a short time. I'm so proud to be a part of it.
Well, thank you. And thanks to everybody for joining us today. Great to have you. Keep an eye out. We'll be doing more events like this and on a variety of different topics. So we'd be happy to see you again next time. All right, then. Well, that wraps it up. Take care, everybody.